Ensemble Profeti della Quinta, directed by Elam Rotem, focuses on the vocal repertoire of the 16th and early 17th centuries. It aims to create vivid and expressive performances for audiences today, while at the same time considering period performance practices. From its core of the 5 male singers, the ensemble collaborates regularly with instrumentalists and additional singers. JMI are very proud to bring you a program that will feature performances from Profeti della Quinta, as well as an interview with Elam Rotem and a presentation of his on the innovations of Salomone Rossi. The ensemble has recorded several CDs with music from the late Renaissance period, and have premiered and recorded 2 works composed especially for the ensemble by Elam Rotem. In addition, they are featured in a documentary film by Joseph Rochlet, Hebreo, The Search for Salomone Rossi, and have had concerts broadcast by numerous international radio stations. Here we have a composition in the musical language and context of the revolutionary musical dramas by Cavalieri, Caccini and Monteverdi, very much of the time of Salomone Rossi. This piece tells the story of Joseph and his brethren. This piece was composed especially for the Ensemble Profeti della Quinta and is set for 5 voices, instruments and basso continuo. The text is taken directly from the book of Genesis in its original Hebrew. The piece stresses the implications of taking early music a step further, not only to bring music from the past to the present day, but by acquiring the lost skills of music making and attempting to understand the spirit of the time, to create a new work of art. This recording is available on a CD by Profeti della Quinta, and we do urge you to please investigate further on the following websites. Welcome, Elam. It is an honor to have you here in this interview with us. Um, Tell us a little bit more about Profeti della Quinta and how they first started.
Thank you, Gil. It's my pleasure to join you here. Profeti della Quinta started as a joke in high school. When I started singing with some friends and we realized that we like singing um, some early repertoire. I had some CDs with music from the 14th century or something. I didn't know anything about it. Just took the CDs, wrote out some notes, and then I brought it to my friends and we sang it in the corridors of the high school. And it started as a joke, and also the name in Hebrew, Nevi'ei HaQuinta, it sounds like a joke, sounds like a heavy metal rock band. And when we started making concerts, we thought that it's fine, but we just have to replace the name. But it was too late, and the name stuck. And when we finally moved to Europe, we decided to translate it to Italian, because most of the music that we are doing is Italian. And it sounds nice in Italian, and people find it intriguing and have their own theories about what it means and so on.
And that's good because, of course, you can. It's part of the fun is that let them give you new theories and new reinventions.
Exactly. Sometimes we see in concert programs explanations, and we are very surprised.
Tell us a little bit more about how you came across these particular works. I mean, was it via Monteverdi or through another route?
So Salomone Rossi is quite a famous figure within the research of Hebrew music, because it's such a special case in the history of Hebrew music. And at least in Israel, he's quite known. I think like every choir or so, they have at least one or two pieces by Salomone Rossi. So when I first met Salomone Rossi's compositions in Hebrew was in the high school choir when I started singing. And it was only later when I came to the Schola Cantorum, um, someone made a CD with this music and they invited us to do the Hebrew bits. And it was then when I really get to know him more and his work as a whole. And then after we won the York Early Music Competition, we decided to dedicate another CD for Salomone Rossi, this time not recording only his Hebrew works, but also combining it in the context of his other vocal works. I mean, he composed a lot. Several books of Italian music, so madrigals and so on, and many books of instrumental music and so on. And his Hebrew music is only a little facet from his work.
So it's the smaller part of his repertoire overall, then.
Yeah, which is not so surprising. I mean, people printed music that will be relevant for others to buy and do. And of course, the Hebrew music project was a very special endeavor, and yeah, that he did toward the end of his life.
What would you say is your sort of greatest inspiration that has come out of this experience of Profeti della Quinta? Because I imagine that you have a number of musical projects on the go at any particular time as a professional musician, and how is this one of those things that you return to again and again?
It happens to be the program that is most in demand.
Ah,
So I would say that this is by far the program that we do the most.
right. And
For
tell it.
some reason, people find it interesting to hear music that sounds like music that they know, but in a special language, and also the fact that it's sacred texts and psalm texts, texts that most people can or know or can relate in some way or another. It's not completely foreign. And also it has this perhaps a taste of something authentic, the original language of those psalms that every A person, even not so religious, might know some sounds in his own language, and then to have these in the original, the way it was heard in the temple or something like that.
Wonderful. Yeah, there is of course lots of research done about um, the orchestra of the temple,
Yeah, of
the
course we
orgava and
don't
the
know anything
kinnor.
about that.
But
Yeah.
of course, it's very difficult for us to find out about it. But one can dream. Do you find that because of the Hebrew nature of the language and the very Jewish elements of his texts, that you find yourself representative of Jews and Jewish music within intercultural or interfaith settings and events with colleagues who are there representing Christian musical traditions?
Yeah, this absolutely happens. Um, yeah, it's a theme, it's a recurring theme that we kind of represent, a Jewish kind of culture. Although it is a very, very unique and one time in history phenomena, the case of Rossi. But nevertheless, they take it as some kind of a reference. But the interesting thing that I find is that um, what happens in practice is that we bring Jewish people who would otherwise never come to listen to an early music concert, come and listen to an early music concert, and then they listen and they hear new things, and then they buy a CD, and then. So in that sense, I feel that we bring early music to new audiences
Excellent.
through Salomone Rossi. So there are two things. Salomone Rossi is, as I said, is known. In the early music scene, he's known very much thanks to his instrumental music. So in that scene, people know who is he. So it's not such a revelation to anyone in that scene. His synagogue music, of course, is quite special. But the other thing that we do is that, inspired by Salomone Rossi and by the things that did not survive by Salomone Rossi, because all the things that we know from Rossi are thanks to his printed music, which is a lot. So we are lucky. But we can only imagine what kind of events and musical events they had in the very, very culture-rich community in Mantova. Yeah, they had a Jewish theater group, and we know that Rossi composed music to them. So when I heard about that, I realized, I mean, just for context, we have lost operas from Monteverdi. Yeah, the important Monteverdi, we have beautiful descriptions of his works that did not survive. So we can only imagine how many things did not survive from Rossi. And when I had this idea that Rossi, I don't know, perhaps he composed some kind of a Jewish opera or a Jewish oratoria, this what made me try and compose myself, taking the same kind of inspiration as him. So joining the Western music language with the ancient Hebrew. And it was in 2011 that I composed the oratoria Joseph and His Brethren. And this is something that is a little bit more difficult to sell, as it were, because it has so many layers of complexity. And is it new or early music? It sounds like early music, but it's new and it's in Hebrew. So this, I would say, is slightly more difficult to sell. But also in the recent years, it's getting better and better. And since 2011, we performed Joseph and His Brethren at least once a year and sometimes twice. This year, we also will perform it twice in more and more respected venues and festivals, which give us the feeling that it is being respected more and more. we would love to perform in the UK. It's even harder now, but it was very hard also before. I think the early music scene in the UK is very strong and a little bit close, and also they have very impressive vocal traditions. They take a lot of pride, and they should. But would be nice to come and sing also from time to time.
It'd be wonderful to have you here in London, Cambridge, Oxford, York, in all the special choral places in the UK representing. It would be a wonderful and a privilege for you to do that.
More early music related content people can find on earlymusicsources.com, which is a website and also a YouTube channel. So if you are interested in early music, please do check it out. And if you like it and you want to support us, you can do that on Patreon. Hello and welcome to earlymusicsources.com. My name is Elam Rotem, and today we'll talk about the composer Salomone Rossi and his innovations at the beginning of the 17th century. The Jewish composer Salomone Rossi, apart from writing truly beautiful music and playing an important role in my own personal musical career, was a very unique figure and an innovative composer. He was extremely prolific and published many books of madrigals, instrumental music, and famously a book of polyphonic Jewish sacred music. In this episode, we will look at 3 cases from these 3 different genres where Rossi showed creativity and innovation. Let's start. From what we know, Salomone Rossi worked and lived most of his life in Mantova. Despite being Jewish, his musical abilities granted him appreciation and acceptance at the city's ducal court. Rossi's most famous colleague there was Claudio Monteverdi. The two collaborated as composers and most probably also as instrumentalists. Monteverdi is known today for his innovations in the field of counterpoint and musical expression, but Rossi was also innovative, but in different fields. As you might know, around the turn of the 17th century, a new kind of music was introduced. Monodic music that essentially consisted of only 2 parts, the solo part and its accompaniment, or basso continuo. This was in opposition to polyphonic music that was made up of several voices, all equal in their importance. A famous figure in this context is Giulio Caccini, who in 1602 published a collection of monodies he called Le Nuove Musiche, the new music. It was indeed new for a composer to compose only 2 lines, one for the voice and one for the accompaniment, but it was not new to hear performances that included only one voice and accompaniment. In Salomone Rossi's first book of 5-part madrigals, published in 1600, in addition to the traditional way of presenting the 5 parts in 5 separate part books, he introduced an additional feature. For some madrigals, in the canto part book, he added a chitarrone intabulation. A chitarrone, that in some sources is a synonym to a theorbo, is a late 16th century lute instrument with additional bass notes. Rossi's chitarrone intabulations are an instrumental reduction of all the voices of the composition. Such reductions, be they for keyboard or lute instruments, seem to have been a common way to accompany polyphonic music. The special implication here, though, is that apart from merely accompanying the 5 voices, it allowed a performance of only one accompanied singer. Let's listen to the beginning of the madrigal Cor mio de non languire, only with its 5 vocal parts. And now, let's listen to the same thing performed only with the canto part and the chitarrone intabulation, as if it were a monody. Rossi's notation, apart from being the first recorded example of chitarrone intabulation, was an innovative attempt to go with the time, to make a bridge between the old polyphonic music and the new monodic music. Just by listening, it's hardly possible to differentiate between new music, composed with only two parts, and old music, performed as new music. Here, for example, is the beginning of a famous monody by Caccini. And here again, Rossi's Cor mio. The two things sound very similar, but arrived at from different directions. Fun fact: in 1602, a nobleman from Padova wrote to the Duke of Mantova asking him permission to invite the singer Francesco Rasi, the biggest star of that period, who some years later sang Monteverdi's Orfeo. The nobleman added that in case Rasi was unavailable, he'll be happy to have instead the two Jews, Salomone and his colleague Isacco. Although it's not clear exactly what kind of music they performed or sang together, being second only to Francesco Rasi says a lot. Rossi's musicianship, both as a composer and a performer, was highly appreciated. Apart from composing and publishing no less than 8 books of Italian secular music, Rossi was also an instrumentalist, probably a violin player, who published 4 collections of instrumental music. These were very popular and based the standards for the instrumental style of the first half of the 17th century. Let's see. Most of Rossi's instrumental pieces were composed in a trio texture, 2 high parts and basso continuo. In his first 2 books, from 1607 and 1608, there are also a few pieces for 4 and 5 parts, but often those extra parts are marked as si placet, leaving the core of the composition made of only 3 parts. In some of the publications, and unlike the norm, the parts were assigned with specific instruments, 2 violins and a chitarrone. The compositions range from light and short movements to groovy dances and longer variation sonatas. However, in the first book one can already find rather special features. Take this Sinfonia, for example. It is written in an adagio toccata style, a bit like a dramatic recit, and includes a typical example of an echo effect. All in all, this Sinfonia is reminiscent of the famous Possente Spirito scene from Monteverdi's Orfeo, that was performed in Mantova in the same year as Rossi's publication. It is highly likely that Rossi took part in the performance of Orfeo as a violinist, but it is even possible that his compositional style influenced some of Monteverdi's music. His third book of instrumental music from 1613 opens with a sonata titled La Moderna, the modern one. It might be that he referred to the use of the diminished fourths in the bass. I'll sing it quickly. Ta ta ra ta 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 ra ta ta. 1 year later, in 1614, Adriano Banchieri discussed this specific interval in his treatise Cartella Musicale. He called it a quarta tritona and commented that it is hard to sing, but since modern composers use it so often, it is getting easier. This is just to show how Rossi was in the forefront of musical innovation and was not ashamed to declare it. In Rossi's time, the Jewish people in Mantova were obliged to wear an identification badge. However, thanks to his being so highly appreciated at the court, Rossi was one of only 2 Jews in Mantova that were exempt from wearing it. Things got worse in 1612 when the segregation of a Jewish ghetto was enforced within the city. This negative development might have been what made Rossi look more deeply within his community and brought him to try and modernize and revolutionize the traditional music of the synagogue. Let's see. In the Jewish year of Shin Pei Gimel, which falls between 1622 and 1623, Rossi published Hashirim Asher Lishlomo, the Songs of Solomon, a collection of polyphonic psalms and prayers in Hebrew to be used as a new kind of liturgical Jewish music. The entire collection is in Hebrew, from the title to the page numbers, and it constitutes the first music in Hebrew ever to be printed. Since Hebrew is written from right to left, and music is notated from left to right, the manner of printing was not obvious. Rabbi Leon Modena, who supported and collaborated with Rossi in the endeavor, wrote in the preface to the collection that they in fact considered printing the music from right to left, but eventually decided not to, so that the readers won't lose their minds. So while the music is printed normally, each Hebrew word is printed below its last note, and the reader must look ahead and divide the word into syllables. Mostly the music is syllabic, so it is quite straightforward. The rabbi explains also that they decided not to include the nikud, the Hebrew diacritical signs which represent the vowels, as the singers should be well acquainted with the text anyway. Thus, it is clear that those who took part in singing these prayers were strictly Jewish, and also, judging by some diminutions found in some of the pieces, that they were highly skilled professional musicians. On this occasion, I will refer to only one piece from this collection, which in a way encapsulates the Jewish situation of that time. Al Naharot Bavel, by the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. Let's listen to its beginning. As you see and hear, it is set in a rather low tessiture, appropriate to the mourning sentiment of the psalm. On the word Naharot, rivers, we see and hear the flow of the water. On the word Bachinu, we wept, we see a chromatic progression in the alto line that finishes on a D sharp. In other episodes, we showed how D sharp, or any out of the system sharp for that matter, was used in that period when harsh affects were called for. As you see, Rossi composed this psalm in the same way that any composer composed at that time, with the aim of amplifying the text and moving the emotions of the listeners. One of the central verses of this psalm is the following: "How can we sing the song of the Lord in a foreign land?" This verse was especially relevant to Rossi, as he literally sang the song of the Lord in a foreign land. On the word nashir, to sing, Rossi used a little melisma, a typical example of word painting. But the way he sets the word al admat nechar, in a foreign land, is especially clever, for at that moment he made an authentic cadence to E. Let's listen. In Renaissance terms, such a cadence is a harsh and extreme progression that steps out of the modal system. With it, Rossi expresses, in a highly intellectual way, that singing in a key which is out of the system is similar to singing the song of the Lord in a foreign land. Further proof that in Rossi's mind this is an extreme move is found in the original notation. Instead of using a standard sharp sign for the F, he used what seems to be a natural sign. In practice, this sign is acting as a sharp, but Rossi thought that such a progression demands a special notation. Check the footnote for a more lengthy explanation of this oddity. Unfortunately, the musical revolution that Rossi and his supporters hoped for didn't survive beyond their time. It was the unique situation in Mantova, where many Jewish people were also professional musicians, that allowed this endeavor to take place. Sadly, during the War of the Mantuan Succession in the late 1620s, all the Jewish inhabitants left or died in the plague that afflicted the city. According to one account, the Jews of Mantova fled to Venice and established a music academy. There is a description of how on one occasion they sang in the synagogue in 2 choirs, even using instruments and an organ. It is very probable that they sang pieces by Rossi. However, it seems that this did not catch on in Venice. Following this description of the performances and the cheering crowd, the writer concluded, "But what of it? All this was like an intense and quick fire. The academy lasted but a short time, and the music returned to its former condition." This was the end of Rossi's attempt to revolutionize the music of the synagogue. The next time Rossi's Hebrew music would get any attention was only in the late 19th century, when the cantor, composer, and researcher Samuel Naumburg published an edition of Rossi's music with the aim of using it in the liturgy. This was but a taste of Salomone Rossi's interesting story and genius. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to check the special page on our website with all the footnotes and other extra information. If you enjoy early music sources, feel free to support us on Patreon. Comment, share, and like. See you next time at earlymusicsources.com.